Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for us to move on with our agenda for this afternoon, and we are moving on with the fourth plenary on MEA's Hydrogen Hub, Bridging Continents for Collaborative Success. All right, so I'm calling on Cornelius MATTHES, CEO of Dii Desert Energy. I'm calling on Michael SCHOLEY, Chief Executive Officer, CWP Global. Matthias SCHIMMEL, Associate Director and Hydrogen Expert, Guidehouse. Welcome to you, gentlemen. And Carlo CECCHETTI, Head of Communications and Innovations of Res4Africa Foundation. Johan DOUMA, Manager, Business Development, GASUNIE. And this session will be moderated by Dr. Jauad EL KHARRAZ, CEO of WECEN. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this session. We are starting a little bit with a delay, but thank you very much for staying in the room. Welcome to everyone to this MEA's Hydrogen Hub session, Bridging Continents for Collaborative Success. So, as you know, we are living in a sort of momentum of the hydrogen industry. So we have been witnessing in the last years a lot of development worldwide in terms of strategies of green hydrogen, in terms of the interest of many investors and off-takers to invest in the hydrogen and Power-to-X. Obviously, all this is driven by the urgent need to decarbonize the energy sector, to decarbonize the different economic sectors, industry, hard-to-abate industries, etc., but also because of the geopolitical context, in particular the war of Ukraine, and obviously the commitment of all the countries vis-à-vis the climate to achieve net zero by 2050 or earlier. So obviously we have many opportunities, and if we talk in particular about the Middle East and Africa, we have a huge potential in terms of vast renewable resources, solar, wind, etc., in terms of the capacities, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of also the geographical location. So there are demanding markets very close, like the European markets. So all these are opportunities, but also we have several challenges related to scaling up the technology or the production of hydrogen and derivative, related to securing sustainable financing, or also building a robust infrastructure. So I will not be long. I will quickly present the panelists. We have an impressive lineup of panelists today with us. We have with us Mike SCHOLEY, the CEO of CWP Global. Also, Matthias SCHIMMEL, Associate Director and Hydrogen Expert at Guidehouse. Carlo CECCHETTI, Head of Communications and Innovation at Res4Africa Foundation. Johan DOUMA, Manager Business Development in GASUNIE. And Cornelius MATTHES, CEO of Dii Desert Energy. So I know that Cornelius has to run to the airport, so I will start with you. So if you could please, Cornelius, give us sort of takeaway messages, so as you are leaving. So I mean, what takeaway messages you can give to the audience in terms of how can we attract more investment in the Middle East and Africa, investment in the hydrogen sector, and what kind of incentives can the government of this region provide to encourage or to make it attractive for the off-takers, and finally, what kind of mechanism of collaboration you can suggest to ensure the collaboration between these countries and also the demanding market like the European Union. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jauad. It's a wonderful title. Since we started 15 years ago, our slogan has been bridging continents, connecting people, so that fits very well. Since we started in 2009, we've been tracking every single project, and we are finally entering the era of exponential growth. We are crossing 30 gigawatts of solar and wind this year, and we predict every of the next few years until end of this decade, a similar capacity added every year. So we will cross significantly the 100 gigawatt mark. And this doesn't include hydrogen. Hydrogen alone, we've been with the MEA Hydrogen Alliance tracking every single project. We are at 113 now. We were at 69 at the end of last year. So we see a sheer explosion of projects. In Morocco, there's big movement, big expectations. So, yeah, what can be done? Of course, it's all about corporations internationally. Europe is the key partner in terms of investor here, but in terms of off-taker as well. So we've been fostering partnerships. That's our core business. On infrastructure, for example, launching the Eastern Mediterranean hydrogen pipeline infrastructure with the German National Hydrogen Council of the German government at COP27. We've been working on reports like the 2x40 gigawatt initiative, which became part of the European hydrogen strategy, pushing these kind of agendas, working with H2 Global very closely, where we saw the first award last month for our partner Fertiglobe, which is very interesting. So I think the things are now execution, focus on execution, stop the infighting between ministries, just focus on execution, realistic timelines, but ambitious timelines. And then I like to close with the two main things which need to be completed. This is not valid for Morocco, because Morocco might profit next year when oil prices go significantly below the 5-year average. That's good for Morocco, that's bad for other oil-producing countries. But we have among the largest fossil fuel subsidies globally here, and these need to be phased out urgently. Countries like Saudi Arabia, they have more than 80 billion per year, and they have a net zero target at the time, so this kind of contradicts. And the fuel subsidies, they need to be phased out quickly, fast, because this undermines any sort of credibility. And secondly, introducing a price for pollution. Pollution is for free in the region, so we need a CO2 price. And I think this alone would make incentives completely obsolete, because imagine the hundreds of billions of fossil fuel subsidies could be, let's say, fruitfully redeployed in productive activities. So that's my statement, and really apologies because I need to run now to the airport, but thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Cornelius. Thank you. Have a safe trip. Bye-bye. So now we'll start a first round of questions to our distinguished panelists. I will start with Mike. Can you tell us more about CWP Global and its large-scale green hydrogen projects? What are the challenges that you face, and what are the most promising opportunities for hydrogen hubs to bridge continents and foster collaborative success? Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me. Brief bit of background, it's not self-promotion, but we got into the PTX business in 2017, which actually is a long time ago for this industry. You know, this is the 4th Marrakesh, global PTX conference, but we've been doing this for a long time. And we came to Morocco in 2019. And why did we come to Morocco? Well, we did an exercise going back 5 or 6 years ago where we looked at literally the map of the world, looked at where the wind was blowing, where the wind was strongest, if you like, where the solar intensity, the irradiance was highest, where the wind and the solar overlapped. Then added another little screening criteria. And what we were trying to find was the best places in the world to do large-scale PTX projects. And as I say, we turned up in Morocco in 2019. When I say large-scale, I mean huge. So our first project, our most famous one, is in West Australia, and it's 26,000 megawatts. And we started it, and the big investor today in that project is BP, the big international oil and gas company. So we develop large projects, and why? Well, ultimately, whether it's liquefied hydrogen, whether it's ammonia, whether it's hydrogen through a pipeline, it's a commodity. And we have to recognize that in a commodity industry, you have to be cheap. You need to be reliable, you need quality, but you also need to be cheap. You need to get the costs down as low as possible. And when we look at it, it's a scale industry. So you need to develop huge projects. In Morocco, as I say, we've been here for 5 years or more. And I think there's a bit of confusion developing right now. Pilot projects are great. But ultimately, the buyers, the off-takers, whether it's in Europe, whether it's global shipping, whichever vector you choose, they're very, very price-sensitive customers. Because our product is dearer. It's more expensive than the current hydrocarbon-based alternative, or it's dearer than blue hydrogen. So again, we need to focus on getting the costs down. And why that's relevant is because If, for instance, Morocco didn't do large projects, if the infrastructure wasn't taken care of, it would mean the projects here struggled to get the offtakes, and then they won't get built out in the short term. Yes, they may get built out in 2040, but other countries that develop larger projects and are more efficient, will go first. So it's really incumbent. It's about the pace the industry develops. If a country wants to go quick, and there's value to be had, there's jobs to be created, there's all those good things, we need to focus on being as cheap as we can as an industry. A lot of the hackathon sessions there were talking about new engineering ideas to reduce costs. I thought that was great, actually. It's really exciting stuff. But also the project scale is really, really important. So we develop large, massive projects. We're here, we're in Mauritania. Mauritania's got incredible resource, but of course Morocco is more developed. The infrastructure here is better, if you like. It's an easier financing environment. It's closer to Europe. Much of the green hydrogen will be used here over time, but also a lot will be exported. And that proximity to a market is really, really key. Other places we have large projects, South America, North America, other parts of North Africa and the Middle East, other projects in Asia as well. So we have a lot of projects, but we're really excited about Morocco because the resource is fantastic and also the proximity to Europe.
Thank you very much, Mike. I will go now to Matthias. From Guidehouse perspective, how do existing policy and regulatory frameworks in the Middle East and North Africa support or hinder the growth of the hydrogen economy? And what financing mechanisms are to be adopted to unlock the full potential of Power-to-X?
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. On the policy and regulatory side, I would say yes and no. There are good steps in the right direction. You have off Maroc, you have Hydrom in Oman. Saudi is going in the right direction with establishing a one-stop shop for hydrogen. But then what I see missing is often the demand side, the local demand side. So a lot of policies and regulation are focused on exporting hydrogen and its derivatives, and I think that's also part of the equation, but you also need local demand in the countries to really build the hydrogen value chain. And I think that's also a point that Cornelius made earlier on. You need demand-side policies as well. They're being developed specifically in the European Union, in the US, in Korea, in Japan, so those really large off-take markets. We have the EU ETS, so the emission trading scheme. We have grants, we have clear targets, we have obligations now also in place for aviation sector, for the maritime sector, but specifically in the MENA region, that is still missing. There is no carbon pricing system. I think the only carbon tax that we have in the area is in South Africa, and I think that's $10 per kilogram of CO2, so that's, I would say, rather low. But some countries are developing mechanisms to also then stimulate local demand. And when it comes overall to policy and regulation, for example, the EU tried to be perfect with its RFMBO delegated act and the requirements, and it took a long time to draft the delegation and then make it into law. And now it's already being opened again. So I'm not sure that's the right approach. So it's more of a try and error. So it's a nascent market. There needs to be some framework. There needs to be long-term stability. And I think that's also somewhere where Morocco really stands out. It's the stability, especially in comparison to other countries in the region. There's a long-term vision that's also supported by the prince and the king. I think that is really important of the Morocco. And then policy and regulation will evolve over time. It needs to be also harmonized to a certain extent with the European regulation, since that will be the largest off-take market. And when it comes to financing, I think there is still a lot of room to get private investors on board. There's still a lot of uncertainty when it comes to the demand side. As I said, there are obligations now in place for certain industries that creates a clear target, also for investors to come in. There's a 1%, 1.2% target in the aviation sector for the European Union to be RFMBO, so hydrogen by 2030, and that is going up to 35% by 2050. So that gives a clear target. Maritime is in a similar direction, and we need more sort of those demand side certainty to get investors in. And then in terms of public money, yes, we need that in the market ramp up, but that money is limited, so concessional financing, bringing in development banks like KfW, EIB, EBRD, I think that's also critical to get the financing off the ground for these projects.
Thank you very much, Matthias, for these insights. I move now to Carlo. Can you tell us a little bit more about what Res4Africa is doing and in terms of boosting favorable conditions for scaling up investments in clean energy technologies, how you work to mobilize the investments of private sector in Africa. I know this week you are in Morocco, probably next week we will be present in South Africa, Namibia, so you are very present in Africa, so could you please tell us a little bit more about your activities? Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you, Jauad, for the questions. Thank you for the organizer for inviting Res4Africa. What is Res4Africa? In a few words, Res4Africa is a foundation made by an association of European and African investors interested in investing in renewable energy solution in Africa for Africans. In few words, it seems to be easy, but it's not so easy, because obviously there are barriers, there are issues that as a foundation we always count to surpass and to solve these issues. We started 13 years ago operating only in the Mediterranean countries of the African continent. 6 years ago, we said, okay, we can do even more, and we opened Res4Africa Foundation, which actually covers most of the countries of the African continent. To unlock the possibility in renewable energy solution for Africa, mainly we operate in 4 different sectors. Obviously, we do institutional relations to function as a bridge between the European continent and the African continent, to facilitate, to open the discussion between the 2 different continents. Then we do, every year we take 2 or 3 focal points. For instance, this year was the year of green hydrogen, and so we decided to realize 2 studies, 2 analyses of green hydrogen possibilities for Morocco, for the Kingdom of Morocco, and for Egypt. All our materials, all our review are completely downloadable for free from our internet website. Then we have the events, we organize events and moments of association between the members and between our supporters and so on, to keep always in mind the possibility to develop, to unlock the investment in the field of renewable energy solution. Last but not least, we do training and capacity building, which is, let me say, the most important activity recently of the foundation. That's why, for instance, I'm very happy that yesterday was announced by the Kingdom of Morocco and by the Republic of Italy that in the next week we will lead a training for 40 students at the Mohammed VI University on the theme of renewable energy solution, with the target to have these 40 students for the first course, that they can then boost up the possibility of renewable energy solution for the African continent. Last but not least, we do obviously also technical support. What does it mean? It means that Res4Africa can do pre-feasibility or feasibility studies of possible renewable energy solution in the African continent. In a nutshell, I would say that we would like to do everything except the construction, the physical construction of objects in the African continent.
Thanks a lot, Carlo. I will move to Johan. From a GASUNIE perspective, what are the main advantages of importing green hydrogen and derivative from the MEA region? And what's your expectation in terms of the potential growth in the upcoming years in this region? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for having me today. Just small words on GASUNIE and the role of GASUNIE also in the value chain, and how we can add a little bit to creating this value chain. GASUNIE is a Dutch infrastructure company, state-owned, originally a gas infrastructure company, having pipelines, having LNG terminals, and also having underground storages. And that's exactly what we try to do also for hydrogen and hydrogen derivatives. So we also try to develop a pipeline system, underground storage facilities, and hydrogen import terminals to be able to accommodate all these molecules from the northwestern part of Africa, but also the MENA region. I think there's a couple of elements also a bit echoing what my previous speakers were saying. Key advantages, but also key prerequisites. You need, first of all, you need vision and you need a strategy. And I think Offer Maroc is a perfect example of having a long-term vision on how you want to develop and how you want to scale up the hydrogen sector. As mentioned before, eventually it all comes down also to costs and to low costs. Perfectly situated in the northern part of Africa, very close to creating this corridor to the northwestern part of Europe, and with optionality, having ship-based imports and ship-based exports, let's say, but also pipeline exports. And this optionality is also very important if you think about scaling up your hydrogen economy. And of course, you need the major players and the government to support these developments. If you look at it from a scaling up perspective, I try to illustrate it a bit on how we do this also in the Netherlands, because I think it might be a good example on how you create a system which is required to also lower the barriers and lower the thresholds to get as much projects up and running and to lower the threshold for these FIDs. And one is creating a pipeline system in the port of Rotterdam. Yesterday, Minister Benali was talking about moving beyond PowerPoint presentation, moving beyond MOUs. Well, that's what we try to do, at least also in the port of Rotterdam, creating a pipeline system for various imports and various evacuation points. There's only one customer still, but it's not a point-to-point designed for one customer only. We have designed it, we've taken risk to make a dimension much larger, being able to accommodate growth and making the threshold as low as possible to also chip in for various import terminals or off-takers of this hydrogen. So therefore acting small with perhaps one point-to-point customer, but thinking big from a vision. And that's exactly what can be done, I think, also in producing countries. How to create the lowest threshold in getting as much as projects up and running. And yes, you need a first mover, and you need to act perhaps a little bit smaller case than you would ideally like to have, but develop also common user infrastructure to really be able to enable the region and the larger area to benefit from this, and to create optionality to move fast if possible.
Thank you very much, Johan, for these insights. I will come back again to Mike. I just saw a few days ago the announcement of CWP Global joining Angolan and German players to develop a 600 megawatt green hydrogen project in Angola. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and how this project would contribute to energy security and economic development in Angola? Similarly, also, if you could highlight the case of Mauritania. Thank you.
No, thank you. Maybe I'll take a little bit of a diversion first. Yeah, I spent the last 10 years working in sub-Saharan Africa, developing, operating, building power projects. And you know, if you look at why we're doing green hydrogen, why we're talking about this, it's all about climate change, decarbonization, net zero, isn't it? Well, obviously, we're sitting in Morocco today. You know, what's the African continent's contribution to climate change? You know, it's about 4% of current emissions, isn't it? It's even lower on a historic basis. If you use an analogy of solar PV, so 20 years ago, to install a new solar PV plant in a country with reasonable irradiance, it would cost you the energy would cost you about 25 US cents a kilowatt hour. Today, we can install solar PV projects in Morocco at about 10% of that, about 2.5 cents a kilowatt hour. So the price has crashed over the last 20 years. And it always used to confuse me why developing countries were putting in solar projects when it was really, really expensive. You know, the European Union did huge work putting in feed-in tariffs, the North Americans with the PTC, the Chinese with the manufacturing and the scale-up. So in some senses, the rich countries scaled up the industry, drove down the costs, and now it's deployable anywhere, and it's, you know, fungible, cheap, easy to install. And I look at the same green hydrogen the same way. You know, I hear these, you see ministers in developing countries going, how am I going to develop a hydrogen economy in this country? The answer is you don't need to, not yet. You need to at some point, but not yet. It's a question of priorities. And strategy is always about, strategy isn't about doing everything. Strategy is about making clear choices, standing behind it. And the hardest thing is to say what I'm not going to do now, what I'm going to do later. So when I look at, you know, the hydrogen strategy of many countries, it should right now be based on export. Export to the rich countries, help them decarbonize. They're richer. They're also emitting a lot more per capita on an aggregate basis than many developing countries. And when the technology is developed, when the hydrogen economy is ready, then deploy it domestically. Don't try and build your economy today. Wait 10 years. Let someone else figure it out. Let the costs come down, and then deploy it, you know, here later. So that enables clear prioritization from kind of governments and ministers. Going back to the question, Angola. Angola's really interesting. I was in Luanda last week, and we signed up a project there. It's about 600 megawatts of electricity, so about, you know, 550 megawatts going to the electrolyzers, a bit less going into the ammonia synthesis loop. And it's an export-driven project. It's going to be located at a new terminal that's already been built by Sonangol. Our partner in the project is Sonangol with Gauf and a couple of smaller German companies. And it's a completely export-driven project. And we were sought out by the Angolan side. And it's because, I suppose it's because of the message we give. It is that, you know, these projects need to be export-driven, you need to be cost competitive, and you need to get it done. So there we have, effectively Angola, it's a slightly strange situation in the sense they've built too many hydro stations in the last year. So they have sort of excess hydropower for the next few years. They want to find a home for it. Then obviously longer term we'll have to build out other renewables. But in the short term, there's very, very cheap, low variable cost, baseload renewable power, which gives us a head start. And going back to my central argument here is we have to be cheap. Because if Angola and we together are able to produce cheap green ammonia, and all of the, you know, all of the regulations, all of the requirements seem to be met, we'll be able to sell that. And as soon as we can sell it, again, you start kickstarting the industry. You know, you have to recollect this industry, or recognize this industry barely exists right now. And it's also moving more slowly than we hoped when we started CWP a few years ago. So we need to get scale-up done. We need to get some projects done. And we need to recognize the first ones have to be cheap. So Angola completely fits, you know, that mission. Essentially, it's spill hydropower we're using, and they want to monetize it and get some value for it. But also, you know, Angola, like many countries, it recognizes today it's a big oil and gas country. Over time, the reserves will run down. And also they need to think about net zero and think about evolving their economy. So in that context, you know, we're perfectly positioned both to export the product most likely to Europe, and also, you know, domestically, it's you know, kickstarting Angola's journey, but it's starting it from a production base, not a domestic consumption base.
Thank you very much, Mike, for these insights. Matthias, what roles do private investment and public financing play in advancing the hydrogen agenda, and what strategies can be employed to catalyze the demand side and attract the off-takers into hydrogen projects?
Thank you. And to take up the solar analogy, a lot of money was put into solar energy, especially from Europe, Germany in particular. Feed-in tariffs was mentioned, so somebody needs to pay for it. the market ramp up. So there will be money needed, especially in the next 5 to 10 years, to really bring the cost down, to really scale up the projects. And there are already instruments in place. I mean, H2 Global was mentioned. There is the European Hydrogen Bank, which is also a cost of difference instrument. There are, of course, grants, etc. Banks are coming in as well. But the key difference that I see compared to solar PV is the infrastructure. In Europe, where solar PV was kickstarted, we already had electricity grids. And for hydrogen, that is not the case. I mean, there are ports. Port of Rotterdam is one example that is fit to import ammonia. They're also now building pipelines. But when we look at it from the demand side, not all, for example, German industry is located next to the ports. There needs to be pipelines bringing in the ammonia, then cracked back to hydrogen to the final customer. So I think that's really a differentiating point from the solar story, that the infrastructure needs to be built. There needs to be a lot of investment. It's a nascent technology. And for example, in Germany, it's already densely populated. Adding additional infrastructure also brings up societal challenges. And then we already have the issue of capacity. The volumes will be relatively low at the beginning. The investments will be extremely high. So who is going to pay for it for the first 5 to 15 years? There is already an instrument in place in Germany, temporal cost allocation, so the costs will be paid back in the future. The European Commission is now taking up that instrument to also fund the corridors, the pipeline corridors to the MENA region. So that needs to be tackled, the whole infrastructure aspect. But then coming to the financing side, I mentioned it before, concessional financing, bringing in the banks, especially the development banks, to support projects in countries that have a certain political risk. I mean, we've been supporting different projects in the region, and the financing costs make up to 50% of the levelized cost of hydrogen. So really then having access to financing reduces the cost significantly. And then your second part of the question was the demand side. So as I said in the beginning, public money will be needed, but then there needs to be a market eventually. And I do want to differentiate between green hydrogen and gray hydrogen. It's the same chemical, but the product is different. There is a green premium, but it's not reflected to me as a consumer. When I buy, for example, a car, I know about its fuel efficiency, but I don't know about the embedded carbon in its production. When talking to OEMs, so manufacturers of cars, they are interested in purchasing green steel, but they're worried about how they can pass on the additional costs to the end consumer. That's why we need green lead markets to bear these green premiums that we see at the beginning, because costs will be substantial and somebody needs to bear it. So what we see in Germany and also in Europe is labeling is really a key instrument, so that to me as a consumer, I can see the embedded carbon in a product and then would be willing to pay a premium. For example, for a conventional vehicle that would cost $50,000 US, instead of using a conventional steel, green steel would increase the cost by around 5%. So that's $2,500. And that's as much as a very simple, very basic sound system in a car. So I would expect that there is willingness to pay, but it needs to be transparent and easily visible to the end consumer.
Thank you very much, Matthias. Carlo, why green hydrogen seems to be very important for the development of the African continent, so in particular Morocco, Mauritania, Egypt, we mentioned Angola, Namibia, South Africa, and what are the opportunities and actual challenges, and in general, the role of green hydrogen in Africa's just transition?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jauad, for the question. Well, I would answer, first of all, telling you this, that the strategy of the European Union by 2030 is to import 10 million of tons of green hydrogen. So if there is a continent which would like to import, there should be someone else, another continent who is ready to export. Taking into account the favorable logistics of the African continent, for sure, as Res4Africa, we see a great advantage for being African continent the main exporter of green hydrogen in the Europe. As far as we know, Kingdom of Morocco and Egypt, they are forward not only from the commercial side but also for the technical side. So it's really a huge possibility, a huge occasion for African continent to be the most important exporters of green hydrogen for European. Then another point which is important to underline is that the green hydrogen technology is rather new. Is rather new, let's say, for all. So also for the African continent, it means that we could start from zero. And starting from zero, you have the advantage to be competitive as soon as possible as a European or as Americans, which could be another very, very good point for Africa. Then another point in advantage of Africa of green hydrogen is that the technology will mean also much more renewable energy solution. So 2 points with one, let's say so, because if you want more green hydrogen, you need more renewables. So installing 100% more of renewables will mean, okay, access to electricity much more for the African continent and the possibility to produce green hydrogen. Last but not least, let me say that another good point for the quick development of green hydrogen in the African continent is the R&D platform that actually are becoming and growing up very quickly in the African continent. Let me say, for instance, what is doing WECEN in Morocco. They are really developing a lot of R&D platform very, very quickly and very, very effective. And last but not least, I would underline once again the possibility to have a capacity building. Once again, starting from zero. So Africa, America, Europe could make all the knowledge, all the know-how all together for forming the young students, and they will be ready for the green hydrogen revolution, let's say what will be, but they will be ready at the same time, in the same level, here in Africa, there in Europe, there in the USA. I think it's another good point.
Thank you very much, Carlo. Johan, how can the MEA region actually leverage its existing energy infrastructure to integrate hydrogen? And what are the potential markets for hydrogen produced in the MEA region, whether domestically, the local market, or internationally? So we know that infrastructure is one of the biggest challenges. Taking into consideration also that we have more than 600 million people without energy services. So what's your perspective on that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would say we've talked a lot about off-take sectors, right? We talked about the maritime sector, about bunkering facilities. We talked about mobility. We talked about also the households, indeed, being a perfect example of where hydrogen finally can end up. And of course, the industry, heavy, high-temperature industries, where hydrogen might be required in order to decarbonize. So there's various options in there. But the question is how to get there and how to get there fast. And if we think about it in the northwestern part of Europe, we talked about a part of the offtake being in the industrial clusters in the ports. However, there's also a very large industrial cluster inland. So in order to get there in time, you need to also think about how to integrate this hydrogen in your existing infrastructure. In the Netherlands, we are able to retrofit part of our existing infrastructure to hydrogen infrastructure. We can do this also with the help of our government, taking also part of that risk in order to do so. But it makes it very fast time to market, being able to accommodate these molecules towards the hinterland before or in 2030, which is a lot faster than having to new build a lot of infrastructure. So that's one example. The other example could be the underground storage facilities. And if you look at Morocco, there's also opportunity to develop underground storage facilities in salt caverns, in salt layers, which there currently are already underground storage facilities. And also creating optionality in there, not only for fossil fuels, but also for renewable fuels, is extremely important in order to be flexible and already creating this option to be able to use it for hydrogen, but making use of existing technologies, but making a sort of a multi-purpose underground storage facility. It could very much help in being able to accommodate growth when it's needed and being able to act fast, let's say. And perhaps also creating synergies in the existing infrastructure, because this is all also new built infrastructure, right? We have developed a LNG terminal in the Netherlands 3 years ago due to the energy crisis that we had. We did it very fast, and we did it for 5 years' time. But we see that the LNG market also in the northwestern part of Europe is still keeping momentum, being able to diversify your sources. But we've done a market consultation for our customers to say, to what extent do you want to keep importing LNG, but also, especially, when do you want to convert into hydrogen imports, and when do you want to increase your molecules? So at once, from one end, decreasing your LNG molecules, and from the other end, increasing your hydrogen imports. And having that discussion with your customers and with the producers, with the end customers, on how to accommodate and create flexibility in your terminal, that is also one of the key elements, I would say, how to integrate it, both the fossil fuels and the fossil infrastructure, let's say, towards renewable infrastructure. I heard there's a lot of talks also about blending hydrogen into your current system. Well, we see a lot of parties also getting back, taking 2 or 3 steps back from that, because you have a very highly valuable product that you put into a lower valuable project. So dedicated infrastructure is definitely there, but creating optionality for yourself, I think, is one of the key in a uncertain development of how fast and how large the energy transition can really take place.
Thank you very much, Johan. I think discussion is very, very interesting, but for the sake of time, I may skip the third round, but I will give you 1 minute per each, just to, if you can give us briefly your perspective on how this collaboration, or how can we make it a collaborative success between, EU, for example, and Africa and Middle East region, in terms of this creating a sort of green hydrogen hub. How can this hydrogen development in MEA region be somehow a win-win deal? I mean, at the MEA region level, we can develop also local capacities, local workforces, and we can also eventually localize the technology, or at least manufacture some components of the industry, whether electrolyzers or others. So how do you see this collaboration could be? Not only, we are feeding the needs of the European market, but we are doing a win-win deal where we are really contributing to each other developments. Thank you.
1 minute. I think the point to take away is that the industry is at a really, really early stage. And we need to recognize both the governments, the developers, all the participants in it, that we're trying to build this industry from the ground up. So it's going to take a while, and we're not going to get to where we want to get to, for 10, 15, 20 years or something else. So it's baby steps right now, both because the demand side isn't there. Various things may trigger demand to increase, but recognize we need to be realistic, and governments and developers be realistic about the state of the demand side. It's pretty nascent right now, so it's just a bit of realism, I think, is the key thing to inject into the optimism. We're all optimistic, we all believe in it, but we've also got to be realistic.
Yeah, just very briefly, I think we have a lot of national visions. We also need to now develop a regional vision. So really a more integrated vision of how the EU MENA cooperation could look like in 2030, 2040, and 2050, and really focusing on the mutual benefits. I mean, there are benefits, of course, for Europe in terms of energy security, access to cheap energy, but there are a lot of benefits also here in the country, in the entire MENA region, in terms of employment and also South-South connection. So not just talk about North-South, South-North, but also integration of the MENA region by itself.
Well, as far as the industry, I agree, is that the beginning stage. I would like to point the focus on the research and development. I mean, in the meanwhile that the regulation, that the legislation will improve, will be aligned from continent to continent, I will try to focus on find out if there could be, how to say, for example, for electrolyzer, most efficient solutions. Actually, one of the minus of the green hydrogen technology is that you need the desalination of water. Maybe I would like to find out, who knows, if it's possible to use electrolyzer which needs a different level of desalination and so on. Actually, we have a little bit of time while regulation and so on will be online. So let's try to focus on R&D.
Perhaps something I mentioned before, act small, but think big, creating optionality. And not only on infrastructure part when thinking about system development, but as you mentioned, also act small, but also act local. Make sure that there's a just energy transition, not only for the northern and northwestern part of Europe, but really locally, regionally, making sure that it also flourishes, not only when it comes down to the infrastructure, but also when it comes down to talent development, etc. So it's for me that's also key in making sure that this transition is really going to happen.
So if not, thank you so much for our distinguished panelists. Thank you to the audience, and thank you very much.
And thank you, Dr. Jauad, for moderating this session. Let's give them all a round of applause.